SwayamPrabha. Digital India. Educated India.
So, maintaining visual unity in a composition is perhaps the only rule that has to be compulsorily followed. We can compromise with all other rules, we can keep on experimenting with the kind of other rules that are already set for visual representation, but we cannot play around or compromise with the basic rule, that is the visual harmony, and the harmony has to be maintained throughout, because it is very important that when we express certain ideas through one image, the image should act as a whole. So, the whole should be predominant over the parts of it. So, this is again that we are addressing the part whole relationship, and we are trying to realize one point, that the moment that that unity is broken, the expression does not remain a single expression anymore. So, it gets divided into parts, our attention gets broken, and that is not desirable in a composition. So, the presentation of a unified image is perhaps as close to a compulsory rule in art. So, when we call it a rule, we should also see that what are the different ways to achieve the unity. If we bring two objects close to each other like this, we have one object here and the other one close to it, we read them together. It can also happen that we maintain some distance and they get together. We cannot see them separately, but it totally depends on the visual proximity. So, if we have two objects in this distance, and as a human being we see it from this distance, we get very close to the object, we will see them separately. Whereas, if we go far, we will see them together because of the visual distance. So, visual proximity is a very important rule that we will have to consider throughout. One has to be very careful while they are displaying one object in a space, like if we put a very large painting which is very large, the wall, the painting, the floor, but we put it in a narrow corridor. So, we have this painting and no visual space. So, we can only have a closer view of this painting. So, a viewer can go till this far to get a view of this painting, and we cannot get the holistic view of it. So, this is a wrong display. We cannot display objects this way. It may hamper visual unity. Now, the next way out to achieve visual unity is repetition. So, by repeating an object, we can create harmony. For example, so if we draw one image and then decide to repeat the image in a composition, the shapes here, the shapes are not attached to each other, there is no attachment. No overlapping. The shapes are different in size, so no uniformity in scale or proportion or size. So, those things are not present, but still because of the repetitive pattern that we have the same image getting repeated in various sizes, we feel that the whole composition will get some bit of a sense of harmony in it. So, that will not create any disharmony, and it will be quite a coherent pattern that will not disturb the viewer's eyes. So, repetition is another way out, and before we discussed about proximity. So, when we have repetition without proximity, we may face another problem. We may solve a problem of visual harmony or unity in this condition also, that we may have a lot of gap in between two images. So, one image here and the other one here may not have a proximity, they may have a lot of gap in between, but only because of the repetition in shape we may still connect them. So, repetition is a very good device, a very useful device when we try to deal without proximity or without many other factors like that. There is another way out, that is continuity, and a continuation is very important. So, unless we have a pattern that will go on for some time, the proximity and repetition may fail if there is no continuity in that. So, when we have a visual image situated somewhere here, there is a tree like formation, we also have certain images like a mountain, we can also have a vase or a jug. We have we may have an apple or perhaps some other images like chair. They all are known images, we can read them, none of the patterns are non-objective. So, here we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 images which are not related to each other. So, these images have no connection to it, and thus it does not give us a sense of continuity. So, we do not read these images together, there is just one common rule that they are following, there is no commonness as such because there are scale differences, and also the arrangement is not unified as such, but at least they have a formation where you can connect these two objects. Let us show it with another color. So, if we put a cross from here to here, it will pass through the mountain somehow vaguely, but that is not sufficient to create a continuity. So, unless we create certain images like a path coming towards the jug or towards a chair, or there is some interrelationship between these two objects, or there is another connection here or another connection here, or it can be if we place this one, we change the apple into a sun, that too the sun will come before the tree, which is again a visual paradoxical condition, and it will lead to a lot of confusion. And we do not want this confusion and disconnection in a composition. So, there should not be any disconnection, any ununiformity to get the composition right. So, unless there is one continuity present somewhere, we will not call it as a single expression. We can divide it into different parts. So, this can be one composition, this can also be another composition. We can have this as part of one composition, this one can also be another composition, but the whole thing will not be effective. So, as we said that the whole is more important than the parts, a continuity becomes a compulsory rule. This is also true that the designer's job to create that unity is not very difficult, because in fact the viewer sometimes they look for some organization from a composition. If we feel that there are disconnection, we mentally connect them, we try to find out different solutions to connect them together. So, it is not that every time the artist has to make the full effort to connect the images, but it is very important from the part of the designer that they should provide the viewer with some bit of a visual clue. Otherwise, it is not possible, and the harmony will be broken. So, to save us from that condition, we should also take the challenge which is like truly more in the organization of elements into the composition and the idea of the theme. Even in the absence of the idea or the theme, it may not change. So, it does not limit it to the idea or senses, and the artistic skill of organization will always produce a very unified pattern. So, there are way outs, and let us see how we can keep on throwing us with that challenge and then face it with effectivity. So, we may have images that are visually disconnected, but we can put them together. At the same time, we can also have images as units. So, we can have images as units, and when the units of a design have common characters in it, like for example, if we keep on making images, so what we see in this picture, that there are characters which are different from each other, but there is some kind of a common characteristic. All of the objects are falling under the same category, and that is talking about the family of this object, that is they belong to the family of bottles. So, they all are bottles, and that way they can get connected. So, there has to be characters in common, but then what if we do not have a character in common in a composition? But then what if we do not have characters in common in a composition? Do we think that we will not be able to create harmony in that? It is not true. We can also create harmony in a composition with disintegrated or different elements. So, let us work on a composition, and I will give you a reference. Please see Paul Werner's paintings as an example. So, if we use the whole composition as one, we will see that this is perhaps how nature is, that there is no connection between the objects that are put in a space. We do not even have a clue whether it belongs to a single space or these are different spaces. So, how to create unity in this condition? So, in this kind of painting, what happens that it is interesting that this is a collection of objects that are essentially isolated from each other. So, we have a collection of objects that ideally has no connection with each other. So, they are isolated from each other. So, we can have a certain placement that is disintegrated, they have no continuity, no proximity, no repetition. So, how to solve the problem gives us some clue that we can take the most useful help from the natural light. So, in this condition, the natural light and shade, the rule of nature may come in use and solve the problem very interestingly. Like if we use a shadow everywhere, we think of a common light source and we produce a shadow for this object. The other shadow can also, it must go this side. The shadow for this object will also be something like this, going in the same direction. This object will also create some shadow. So, all the shades will go in a single point. Then we can also give it a common background. And as we discussed earlier in our lectures, that a common background gives us a common context. So, a careful placement of the objects that are strategic, as we use the shadow very strategically, that all the shadows are going in one direction. That means there is one common factor, and that is the common source of light. And of course, when there is a light, there is a shade also. So, all the shadows are very strategically created. So, by using the natural laws or naturalism, as a device, we can solve a lot of problem related to visual unity. So, in the design problem solving, the naturalism device can play a very vital role.